Hello and welcome to another Property Week in Conversation with session. My name is Mitchell Labiak, news editor at Property Week, and today I'm joined by Jonny Britton, founder of LandTech, a proptech company which provides a range of web services that aim to make Land Registry and local planning committee data accessible. Today we will be talking about the changes residential development has been through in the last few years. Updates to the planning system and shifting attitudes in where people want to live have led to the introduction of new players and new investors, as well as new technology companies such as LandTech. So, Jonny, how have things changed for residential developers in recent years?
It has brought about changes and uncertainty, even more uncertainty. So changes in the way that people might want to live. This is happening across the world. So in the UK, we see people maybe trying to move out of cities, trying to get a bit more space. They can work from home now. So do they need to go into the office as often, and therefore can live a little bit less connected to that workplace? In the US, we've seen these trends already, and through the pandemic, that just accelerated a huge amount. You might have seen these mayors coming out and trying to bring people in, and that really has happened. People are moving to Texas, out of California, Florida. So we've seen just like an acceleration of some of the trends that were already happening. So the way people live have changed. Planning has changed. So right at the centre of the property development industry is the planning system, and we've seen B1C to C3 being allowed, use class Q, R, E. So building heights and what airspace is allowed, so a real loosening off of the general permitted development. Talk about moving to zoning systems, so radical reform. What's interesting, because we're kind of looking from a global perspective again, is that you see the ability for a small nation like ours to be able to be quite dynamic at a national level and make sweeping reforms. But then you see some of the other systems that we're looking at for ideas how to make things more predictable and consistent, and they struggle a bit. In the US, for example, they can't just make a radical reform from the top because it had such massive impact against such a huge population. It's done at a more decentralised level. A lot of the planning is done, implemented in different ways in different places.
The planning restrictions being loosened, is that a worldwide thing, and is it a good thing?
So I couldn't speak for the whole of the world, but in the US, for example, it gets loosened at a different level. It's not a national system. The way they implement zoning is interpreted differently by different states, and it really is quite an interesting system because it's quite democratic in the way that often you see places like Minneapolis, the people have got a YIMBY movement, yes in my backyard movement, and they're really pushing for change at the kind of state level, and they see some things actually happening, and that does kind of get the attention of the federal government, and then they push the federal government to do more. For example, making single family homes suitable for more dense uses. So you kind of see a different implementation or a different way of the system being loosened. In the US, it's such a big, broad place, it's not as obvious.
What are planning systems in other countries like compared to the UK?
In a lot of places around Europe, Germany, you have this kind of more upfront process of engagement, and then the rules are set, and then there's kind of the plans are laid out, and there's a bit more predictability in theory about what can be done. Over here, we have council-wide set policies, and they last on these 5-year plans, and then planning applications go in against them. And it becomes, from that point onward, a more precedent-based system. And you think that those are quite different approaches, and there's a lot of talk about the UK going towards that approach. But in actual fact, what you see in practice is that it's almost like the rules of the game are just slightly different. And whereas you have a zoning system, it's supposed to be predictable. you see it doesn't work. Times change. The land use plan doesn't, technology moves on, and population inward migration happens, whatever it is, there's so many changes. And so people need to rezone an area, or they need a zoning variance. So they're looking at a big site, half of it's in a zone for residential, half of it's zoned for something else. They want to take it all on for residential uses, and it becomes a negotiation. What's in it for us for you to be able to do that? It can vary the zoning system, and it sets a new precedent, which is kind of like what it is in the UK as well. So it's interesting that we look to their systems about how we can make it more predictable and fair over here. And they're often saying to us, we wish it was more dynamic like it was in the UK system. So when you're talking about loosening off the UK system, the way I kind of think of it, because I was a town planner by training, is that some of the older implementation of the planning system, which is about protection, trying to prevent sprawl, looking after our nice national parks and places and heritage, creating control of the town centres and where you want people to go and do the shopping and how you want them to live. That's all being loosened off quite a lot, and I actually think it's a good idea, because especially in times like these when it's changing quite a lot and we don't exactly know how people are going to live, it does let the market decide a lot more. And as long as there's controls around design and what look good and not letting things get out of hand, I do think that it could create opportunities.
What can be done to help developers deliver more housing?
The World Economic Forum has said that 90% of the top 200 cities in the world have a housing crisis. So there's no simple solutions here. If there were, I'm sure they'd be being brought over and implemented, and you can't just tweak things and expect radical changes to happen. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is that our company's view is that it's not just about volume of supply, it's about the right homes being built in the right places for the right kind of people. So if you think, if you had a really nice place where, you felt safe, connected, there was opportunities, you could travel around, but you didn't have a particularly nice home, it was suitable for your needs, but it wasn't particularly nice, you'd probably feel okay about things. But if you flip that around and you had a really nice home, spacious, everything you needed, but you stepped outside and you felt unsafe and you couldn't easily get to work and there was no good local amenities, are you going to be as happy? So our view is it's more about the place. So we actually enable better place making. We work with property developers who are building the kind of places that communities need. We are trying to engage more with the communities to get lots of information about what they need in order for property developers to be better informed when they're making places. And this is done through the democratization of data, which are turned into tools, which is then used to make things faster and smarter and more easy to collaborate and communicate with.
In using technology to streamline things, isn't there a risk of creating cookie-cutter housing, which is all the same?
I get accused of putting a technology can cure all problems hat on sometimes, and I kind of somewhat believe it's true, but it's not so straightforward because you can't always see it coming, and a lot of things fail and can create a lot of hot air. But some things really break through, and when they break through, they're big and they make radical changes in the way that people didn't expect. So I do see that because of the groundswell of proptech activity now, there's going to be a lot of big things happening, but it's not going to be obvious where they're coming from. But if you start to think about putting people together so they can be on the same page and they have access to more of the data and the information that they need, and they can more quickly turn things around, the property market just begins to move faster, whether that's property developers getting information about sites, site finding, being able to apply for funding faster, working on planning, making their planning arguments, bringing the planners into the process, whether it's conveyancing, whether it's house builders selling their properties at the end. There's activity happening in the broad spectrum of property development at the moment.
Could these kind of tools work on the global scale, and to what extent can or should proptech translate from one country to another?
Well, there's obviously no right and wrong answer to that, but technology can be exponential. It can go global. If you think about an interface, everyone accesses technology through an interface, and on that interface is some data. And whether it's zoning data or planning policy, it's still kind of the legislative process against the rules against which you apply for a planning application. So if you think that an interface could handle the information which is planning or zoning, and it's kind of interchangeable depending on where you are, but in the background, that's where there's just an enormous amount of variation, and you have to normalize all of that. So the wider area of geography that you go to, the more standardization complexity kicks in, and the more different sources of data that there are. It could be everything from different kind of map projections to the format the data comes in. It could be the quality of the data. It could be how up to date it is. It just becomes incredibly difficult. But we're living in an age now where there's extremely powerful storage, processing power, affordable online cloud-based systems which can help you when you're tackling massive data problems like this. Machine learning is the main one, and it comes in lots of different kind of shapes and formats. And we are deploying that. We've done it across all the councils in the UK, 350 odd councils, to gather all the planning documents and make that into what you could say one single kind of database which they can all be read and interpreted from, and the same for policy. So, and then we deploy our machine learning so we can interpret this information. So for the user's perspective, you could be at any council in the land and the information's the same on a screen. Scaling that up across the world is a massive technical challenge, but it's one that we've got in a world-leading expertise in, having been one of the only companies that have ever done this. I wouldn't say that we're replacing the art of architecture or trying to think how local planning laws should take away from the character of an area, which is different in every place and based in historical roots. We love that. This is what we want to encourage and make better use of. But what I would say is that, and I completely agree, it's an emotional decision to buy a house, and each property or the space that it has means something to different people and their lifestyles. But in terms of the area, how do people think about an area at the moment? They don't have any information. We're asked to make some of the biggest investments we ever make in our lives without really truly understanding how an area works. Or if you really want to understand how it works, you can go into the council websites and try and piece things together and look at the local plan about what's going to change and how the roads are going to change, how it's all planned out, where the site allocations are. You need a degree to be able to do that, or at least a lot of experience in how to interpret this information. And that's just the raw data. If you can then extrapolate that data and make it work on aggregate, then you can start to see the trends. And then you can start to see, well, this works in one area. They've got something planned here. What kind of thing is going to happen based on this experience they've had over there? And you can draw real data from this. So allowing people to tap in to that new understanding of how places work and what they want out of a place, that's the kind of power that I think data can give them.
What does the future look like for residential property development?
We know it works. And this is just the beginning. I kind of refer to it as like having the sticks and the rocks that cavemen had. We haven't scratched the surface of what this business is going to become, and we're just one of many businesses in the property tech industry. So I know that changes are coming. You can kind of see around corners in some respects because of that. And I think it's interesting because the way these things play out will be a lot of pools of data that get connected that everyone's mining a seam of data in their own way. We're all about land and planning and development, so we're getting this kind of lots of nice data on land and development sites. Others are getting data on construction and how construction industry works and the time it takes and the safety issues and predictability and models on how to do it better. Others on how people live in the properties and ongoing management and how you can think about serving them better. These all start to become connected to each other, all these puddles of data in each of these places, and I think that is just going to enable a better, more efficient way of us having visibility on the property industry, which we all know doesn't particularly work well, and is a huge investment for people in their homes.
Jonny, thanks very much for your time. Really interesting to hear how technology could change the way residential development works. And thank you to you for watching at home, and we hope to see you next time for another In Conversation With.